So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio.
Are we pro-free Britney or anti-free Britney? Britney Spears is in the news again. I didn't know if we could kind of get over the whole Britney revolution, and it hit me, baby, one more time. Please, needs to stay in my childhood and never come back. I hated that song. Also, I wasn't allowed to listen to Britney Spears growing up or watch music videos, yet alone Britney Spears music videos. But Britney's been in the news a lot this last year over conservatorship. And here's what's interesting. Should she be freed from her father's reign, as some people will call it, or should she continue to be under her father's decision-making? Having to do with social media use, to money, to deals she will and will not sign. Well, Britney has refused to perform until her father is no longer her custodian. We'll unpack that and so much more today during Trending. It's our weekly happy hour. And, you know, I don't think people are as happy about the Grammys as they used to be. I think the only people watching the Grammys this year were probably maybe your grandma, your grandma's grandma, and that's about it. The Grammy Awards kind of tanked. I mean, I don't know. Do you think they tanked? Let me know. So, in the last year, viewership has dropped more than 50%. 2020, we saw about 19 million people watching. This year, they only had about 8 million eyeballs for 2021. What does that mean? Pay attention. People have been inside for a year. You'd think that this would be a momentous moment where people really wanted to see what Hollywood did and cared about. But actually, there was this massive tune-out. Why? I think that people are voting with their eyeball power, and they're desensitized to the constant Hollywood drum. They're sick of it. They want more. They don't want the same old thing. Sure, they may have moved on to the royals. Maybe that's just it. Maybe the real-life drama of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry are truly what kind of is catching the attention of people. But in reality, maybe people really want a fairy tale story, and Hallmark isn't that far off. We got our Hollywood story brought into the prince and princess world. I don't know. I think that people want a happy ending, and they're tired of seeing what is not a happy ending when it comes to the Grammys and Hollywood. So I think my take is we have this happy hour. People are happier without Hollywood. People are happier without consuming so much content where they turn and look to others to define what their music style should be, what their clothing should be, or should we say lack of clothing, as we saw last night on the Grammys. Not even worth it. I saw someone point out Mr. Potato Head, Dr. Seuss, and so many others are being canceled. But what happened last night at the Grammys was not canceled. Food for thought. I often comment that saints travel in packs, and how this saint knew that saint who influenced one another. And we've said before, it's not what you know, but who you know. And today's saint is yet another example of this. Saint Louise de Marillac. She started the religious order of the Daughters of Charity with Saint Vincent de Paul. Did you know that those two were friends? And not only that, her counselor for some time was St. Francis de Sales. Boom, 3 saints right there, all connected. Saints truly are the best types of friends that you could have. The reality is, saints make saints. And so it brings me to this question over and over again. Who do we keep as our company? And ultimately, what do you do with your friends? Do your friends challenge you and grow you? Or do they kind of draw you down and prevent you from growing? Do they frustrate you and anger you? Well, sometimes anger can be a sign of the lack of growth on a personal level. Or anger, as we talked about on Friday, could be a sign of those things that we are attached to which we need to detach from. We could use healthier attachments when it comes to our friendships. So let's think about, for example, Saint Louise de Marillac, because she started a religious order, the Daughters of Charity, with Saint Vincent de Paul. And Marillac really showed us the example of saying yes. You know, Saint Vincent de Paul was looking for someone to join him in his mission. And when he saw St. Louise, it really made a big impact. To see at first, he kind of wasn't really taking to her as someone who could join him on his mission. And all of a sudden he thought, no, God sent me this person, and this is someone I can use in the work that I'm doing. And so maybe you're struggling with your friendships. Did you know that truly God does provide friendships? Just maybe you're not opening your eyes to the friendships he has set right in front of you. Friendships of future saints. Or we could be a little more humble and just say fellow sojourners who are trying to be holy. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie. It's great to be with you. My guest today is Dr. Janet Smith. If you are not familiar with her and her work, you should be. She's an author, speaker, and retired professor from Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit. She is one of the main voices who has advocated and defended the Church's teaching on Humanae Vitae, that is, understanding the Church's position on hormonal contraception. In a little bit, we're going to discuss the top 3 things she wishes that she could tell a young woman today about contraception. But before we go there, she's recently retired, and I was looking at her email signature, and it really stood out to me. She's tired and retired, but not down and out. And you recently, Dr. Smith, had a conversation about the Eucharist and attending Latin Mass, and I wanted to talk about how, for you, someone who's been such an advocate for human life and has truly fought in a culture that is so pro-contraception, how has the reverence for the Eucharist really transformed both your prayer life and your mission that you continue to be called to?
Well, thank you for the questions. Thank you for having me on. I love to talk about the Latin Mass, actually way more than I like to talk about contraception. But it's new to me, among other things, in a way. I grew up with it. But it was not the best experience. The parish that I went to, the priest said it extremely quickly, about 19 minutes for a Mass. And, a lot that was lost as far as reverence is concerned. But one of my brothers was a server, and he clearly was very moved by that experience. So he has left the church, unfortunately. Still praying for him to come back. But he
maybe that 19-minute long Mass. I don't know how it's possible in the Latin Mass.
Yeah, it could be. Well, I think it was his miseducation at Georgetown, I think, is what did it. But when I visit him, he goes to a Latin Mass with me, and he loves it. And he talks about with great nostalgia that that's the Mass that he grew up with. And I think he would have a very hard time coming back to the Novus Ordo. He has a great respect for the Latin Mass. And, as you know, it's generally at least an hour and a half. And he went with me and just was absorbed the whole time. And I think that's what it does. It has this strange way of just, I don't know if it's so strange, but it's strange in comparison to your experience with the Novus Ordo. With the Novus Ordo, it's just so incredibly active, and you're kind of up and down and singing, and the priest, as you see him, and so you're focused on him and what he's saying and doing. Whereas in the Latin Mass, I find that myself, and I can see with others, that you very quickly enter into a very receptive, serene state. And I can just see, like with myself, I just feel whatever my problems are just disappear for that time. And I am just really enjoying being in this very transcendent, worshipful atmosphere where every movement is calculated, where every movement has great meaning. And the altar boys, the altar boys are quite a major part of that Mass for me. I can't say major, but my goodness, the fact that there's like 12 young men who
yes.
Have gone through all this training, and they're so reverent and they're so determined to, again, make every motion perfect. And it's just, there's just something that And of course, I love the text. I love the text of the Mass. I love the prayers. I think they are so much more profound than the prayers of the Novus Ordo. Almost everything that's said in the traditional Latin Mass is said in some way in the Novus Ordo,
Right,
but
right.
not with
Just
the depth and
differently. Yeah.
differently, not with the depth. It's not repeated as often. I think the repetition, I've been helping some of my friends learn some Latin, and, we keep noting the repetition, and how important that is. I think even one of my friends is a Melkite Rite. And of course, whenever she does the the sign of the cross, she does it 3 times. And it's so much better because the first time you barely are aware you're doing it. The second you're kind of aware you're doing it. The third time you're really aware you're doing it. So it takes that long for us to get out of whatever our mind is focused on at the moment, to refocus it. And that's what I think so much of the repetition of the Latin Mass does, is it keeps our focus on God.
That's Dr. Janet Smith. Something you just said really reminded me of, when you go on a vacation, Dr. Smith, it takes a little while to unwind. You're probably finding this in your retirement. You finally unwind and then you can pay greater attention. Well, the Latin Mass, one thing I noticed, there's more work in terms of being present for prayer, but there's an atmosphere that tends to be more respectful toward the liturgy in general. And then at the same time, it's as if you were on a retreat and you were receiving and being filled up in such a profound way. And I shared with you prior to the show, I kind of went dragging my feet. You and I have both kind of come out as out of the closet as Latin Mass attendees. And I remember a couple of years ago, my husband and I were then just dating. And he said he wanted to start going to Latin Mass. I'm like, oh gosh. In my mind, I thought, okay, those judgmental people, and I full disclosure, those judgmental people, here I am, right, saying this. And then, the veils, the clothing, people tend to think, okay, people who go to Latin Mass dress frumpy. I'm just being honest. These are the things that a lot of people think. And so I went dragging my feet. And I remember sitting there that first time I went with him, and I had gone when I was younger and couldn't stand it. But I sat there, and afterward I said, wow, I felt like I went on a retreat. And the next week we went again, and I found myself, originally I thought, well, I'll go to, daily Mass, Novus Ordo, it'll be fine, then we'll go to the traditional Latin Mass on the weekend. Well, I found myself more and more looking forward to that time over the weekend. And what I discovered is that it really continued in a special way to form and inform me in my own mission, both preparing me for marriage, but then also for the work in this apostolate as well.
Oh, I feel that way. I mean, I am so eager to get to the Mass. It is just, I always liked going to Mass because you meet Jesus there. But now, as you said, I like your description of it as a retreat. And I try to describe it to people as more like Eucharistic adoration than it is like the Novus Ordo, because it is so reverential and you're so focused on that Jesus is coming, and you're preparing for Jesus coming. So you're getting yourself prepared. Again, the Novus Ordo follows the basic pattern, but where you confess your sins and you pray for the dead and you pray for the living, you listen to the epistle, you listen to the gospel. But somehow in the traditional Latin Mass, it's so much clearer to me that I'm getting closer and closer, in a sense, to the altar and to the sacrifice. And we're preparing for that. And then the priest takes over. Then the prayers are the priest prayers. And he's praying very intently. And priests who say the Mass say it's such a different experience to say the prayers silently and say them facing the altar. And I tell my friends, you can follow as much of that as you want. My recommendation is that you read it slowly and prayerfully, and just allow God to speak to you. Again, and if you feel that you want to stop for a while and just sit with some, thoughts and prayers, do it. You don't have to follow every word that the priest does. The Mass is not designed for that, especially the offertory of the Mass. So people, I can't see where we are. I can't follow. I said, stop worrying about it. Absolutely stop worrying about it. That's not the purpose. That's what the bells are, to call you back and say, okay, now we want your attention. Something is happening here that it's best that you leave whatever reverie you're in and focus on this.
And also the profound element, if you're just joining us, you're listening to Trending with Timmerie. That's Dr. Janet Smith, the author, speaker, and retired professor from Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit, who's been an avid defender of Humana Vitae. Dr. Smith, the thing that stands out to me in what you said, when we think about the priest facing toward Christ in the tabernacle, toward the east, that is a moment where we're reminded the priest is making the sacrifice for us. And so often I've heard many young moms who struggle with paying attention during Mass because their kids are running about. And they've often commented how peaceful it is for them to acknowledge the fact that although they are distracted, they are fighting to remain present, but they are so grateful because they understand that the priest is offering that sacrifice for them, and it turns them to turn back toward Christ just as he is.
Yes, I think so much to have that sense that we are at the foot of the cross. And there would have been a lot of movement, distractions, etc. I mean, it's better to have it quiet and transcendent, but I'm telling you, the kids, apparently the Mass I go to, it's very clear. It's filled with young people, filled with young families, filled with small children.
Isn't it amazing?
And every once in a while, the priest will say something about kids crying and, say it's fine with us, don't worry about it. But I'm thinking, I don't even notice it. I don't even notice it. And again, it would be much like I were under the cross. If there was a mother standing here that had to deal with her child and I'm at the foot of the cross, I don't notice that because my focus is on Jesus. And, and I understand that even when she's dealing with that child, that's where her focus is. That's where she wants her focus to be. So she's sort of always trying, she's dealing with her child and whatever attention her child needs and giving it to him, but she knows why she's there. And so it really has this, that's my sense, is that there's and the one I go to, there's so many new people to it. Almost nobody's wearing a veil. I mean, and unfortunately, to some extent, some people are dressed like they dress for the Novus Ordo, which is, cargo shorts
jeans
and
t-shirts
and t-shirt. Yes, and I haven't seen anybody say anything to them. I'm not saying anything to them. I'm quite sure that over time they will change. And I'm extremely happy they're there. And yes. Once you look around, though, you say, I got to up my game as far as my appearance is concerned.
And I want to nuance that a little bit because maybe you're listening right now and you're like, oh, well, I wear jeans, flip-flops, and a t-shirt to Mass. And I will admit, Dr. Smith, that's, kind of sometimes in my weekday mode of operation. But on the weekend, it's the Lord's Day, and I try to make sure that I am dressed in a way which is acknowledging this day and the great sacrifice. But I think as a culture, we've lost this idea of dressing up for the occasion as well. You wouldn't wear what you'd wear to the beach to daily Mass, yet alone Sunday Mass. And I think that, as some people might feel judged even by us saying that, it's more so a challenge of putting yourself in the presence of the Lord and trying to show that with the way you dress.
Yeah, I remember one time after a Novus Ordo Mass, I was talking to a friend who's a lawyer, and he would dress up, of course, beautiful suit every day. And to church, he would wear jeans and a flannel shirt or something. And I challenged him. This wasn't TLM, this was Novus Ordo. I challenged him. I said, why do you do that? And he said, well, I have to dress up all week. I don't want to dress up one more time, and then I can come home and clean the garage. And I said, just listen to yourself. Just listen to what you said. And I mean, when I go to the TLM, there's so many little boys who have sports jackets on, or at least, a nice little shirt and sometimes a tie. And you can just, whatever. But you can just tell, their hair is combed, and just that attempt that kids, this is special. This is special. And a lot of kids like to dress up. Some don't, but a lot do. And, they love knowing that they're putting on their best shoes and their best everything. And I think that just contributes. It's a smallish thing, but it's a thing that really does contribute to our understanding of this event.
Now, how has your change in liturgy over the last couple of years influenced your work as well? If you could share briefly.
Well, again, a lot of things have influenced my prayer life. Certainly that has. I mean, I say it's like every week. It's just I want to go early and I want to stay late. And some of this came out of COVID because when COVID happened, I started watching the Latin Mass. Do you want me to stop here with the...
Oh, We'll come back. We'll be right back with
Yes.
Dr. Janet Smith here on Trending. She'll share 3 things that she wishes she could share with a young woman today about contraception, and a little bit more about how attending the Latin Mass has changed her life personally over the last couple years. We'll be right back here on Trending. Don't go away during our happy hour. This is Timmerie from Trending with Timmerie. Tuesday on Trending, it's all about men and women. Did you know that the goal of exercise for women is different than the goal of exercise for men? And it doesn't just have to do with looks and how much you can lift. So we're going to talk about that, along with the fact that apparently your kids aren't supposed to say mom and dad anymore in school. Let's talk about parents' rights. Join me at 6 p.m. Central on Relevant Radio or the Relevant Radio app. Catholic Order of Foresters is proud to sponsor the Relevant Radio studio line. For information about employment opportunities and flexible premium life insurance plans, visit relevantradio.com/Forester.
Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
You may say there are far more important things we could be talking about on Catholic radio, but actually, we're talking about the Eucharist now, and in a little bit, we're going to talk about freeing Britney. Do you know what's happening to Britney Spears? And if you don't care, you should. I will give you the play-by-play quick breakdown, but really give our Catholic perspective on this entire situation. Joining me now is Dr. Janet Smith. She's the author, speaker, and retired professor from Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit. In a moment, we're going to talk about those 3 things that she wishes she could tell a woman today about contraception. But before we go there, just briefly, Dr. Smith, you were sharing about how you've fallen in love with the traditional Latin Mass. And for anyone who's listening, this is purely about the love of the Latin Mass. It has nothing to do with bashing the Novus Ordo. If that's what you take from it, so be it. We're talking about the incredible experience of attending a liturgy that has deeply impacted so many people and has really made a resurgence in our culture today, with so many young people turning to it and the historicity of the church with the music and the incense, the bells and all the whistles. And so if you could share just briefly how this return to the Latin Mass has informed both your reception of the Eucharist and your ministry as well.
Well, this is kind of a tangential effect, but during COVID, when we were going to Mass online, I found a Latin Mass in Limerick, Ireland, that I loved watching.
Wow.
It was so gorgeous. But I was sitting in my recliner with my laptop, in my pajamas, and I'm thinking, this doesn't seem quite right. So I put together a nice corner altar in my room, and I have this beautiful altar now that I pray at all the time. And I just always want to pray there. I light candles and I have icons. And again, it's this sort of carryover of the reverence for the Mass, which is all about reverence for the Eucharist, that just carries over into the rest of your life, that you just want things to be appropriate and the way that they should be. And it's an elevation of prayer. It's an elevation of life. I mean, I've been, teaching for years and trying to learn myself that, that every person deserves reverence in a way. Every person was made by God, the Creator. And he loves everyone, and we're meant to love them too. So there's a way in which that the elevation of the Mass makes everything elevated. So that's what it's done for me.
That's incredible. I love how that has really informed you in a profound prayer life. Dr. Janet Smith here on Trending with Timmerie. You've been an avid defender of the church's teaching on hormonal contraception. I remember reading some of your books talking about how you were actually having Humanae Vitae and various teachings of the church faxed to you over periods of time prior to the internet and the access we have today. That's how long you have been defending and teaching what the church teaches you. Can you share, let's say, those 3 things that you wish a young woman, high school, college student would know about contraception?
Yeah, well, first of all, and I'm not going to do it in order of importance, but they certainly should pay attention. My talk, Contraception, Why Not, which is available on my website, janetsmith.org, for free.
We'll link to that on social media for sure for people to listen. Incredible talk.
Yeah, and I spent a lot of time talking about the bad health effects of contraception, and they are considerable. I mean, people who want to eat organic food and want to have the atmosphere clear of chemicals are putting really horrible chemicals. Women are putting horrible chemicals in our body to stop what is a very natural and ennobling part of our body. We're treating our fertility as though it were an enemy and as though it needed to be suppressed, and that we were willing to take drugs in order to suppress something that's absolutely natural. And we can just absolutely anticipate that they're going to have bad side effects. They're not correcting a malady. They're suppressing a healthy, natural thing. There's a fascinating part of my talks. I've got another talk, Hormones Are Us, that's also available. And that's talking about hormones, putting those hormones in our body, significantly change our relationships with males.
Yes.
That the notion of chemical attraction is true. All right.
Right, the pheromones.
And the pheromones, and male and female are very drawn to each other. Not everyone equally to the same person, because there's different chemical makeups that respond differently to the different person. And it actually might be a marker of whether or not you can successfully procreate with that person. There may be a match with these pheromones, but there's also women choose different men when they're on chemical contraceptives than they do when they're off of them. And men are much more attracted to women who are having fertile cycles than those who are not. That's a simple evolutionary kind of truth, that our bodies are made for procreation, and we're going to be more attracted to each other when procreation is a possibility. And women choose more masculine men when they're fertile, and more sort of softer, kind of friendlier guys, brother types, rather than the guy that really excites you when he walks into a room, and where you just go like, whoa, what just happened here? Kind of make you weak in the knees sometimes. So that's, women lose that. That. I mean, the chemical contraceptive. Yeah,
that's so important what you just said real quick, because I want to touch on this. Yeah. And you've talked about this so many times before. When women are so all of a sudden no longer on the pill, let's say they married someone or they suddenly want to have children, they'll all of a sudden be looking at the man they were dating, the man that they got married to while they were on contraception, and they're suddenly not interested because their hormonal complementarity, essentially, they're not interested in that kind of man. It was, in a sense, the hormone speaking through the contraception, the contracepted version of herself that has been completely chemically altered.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the pill does so many things. I mean, women gain weight, women get depressed, women are, again, absolutely moodier from the whole situation. You're thinking, like, what would make you want to take this? And the second major point, and it's related to the first, but just if women didn't have access or refused to take these contraceptives that are so harmful, they wouldn't be having premarital sex.
Right.
All right? They wouldn't be having premarital sex. This is huge. They would be attracting men because of their fertility. I mean, women it's gotten somewhat better in the last few years. I don't know why, but women largely have dressed immodestly for a long time, and they spend zillions of dollars on makeup and, things to make themselves attractive to men, and they suppress what makes them most attractive to men, which is their fertile hormones.
Right.
And men will tell you this. They will tell you this. It's not the woman with the, hair that cost $180 and the makeup and the jewelry and everything. It's some other quality, and they can't quite put their finger on it, but it's some other quality, and some of them don't like what women are doing to try to make themselves attractive. They'd like the women to wash the makeup off.
The tattooed eyebrows? What are you talking about, Janet Smith? Men don't like that.
They barely notice. And when they do, it's saying, why do you do that? I mean, the women are so shocked when the man they're interested in first time sees her without makeup, and he says, I like you better without makeup. And she goes, how could you? How could you?
There are moments where I'll wake up and my husband will be like, are you wearing makeup right now? And I look at him, I think, why on earth would you ask me that question? I just rolled out of bed. He's like, I swear you're wearing makeup. I'm like, okay, apparently I shouldn't get ready at all.
That's right. No, that's so often the case. They see things differently. And I really do think, among other things, I think there's this most important thing, not about contraception, but that women God has put some little divine spark in us that some men are able to see. And when they see it, they become so enamored of us, captivated, absolutely, bonkers. And we're looking there saying, why would you become bonkers about me? And they are. And you just have to accept that as a gift that God has given us, and not to deny it, not to reject it, and not to try to make sense of it. The man's crazy about me. I have no idea why, but golly, I love it. All right. And we don't have that same craziness about them. In a way, they have to. We don't. They have to earn it more. They have to earn it more. We don't have to earn it. We can destroy it. We can lose it. Right. We can. But what we have that attracts them, it's really hard to know what it is. When you say you're really attracted to a man, especially after you can be attracted to superficial things, but after you get to know him, you're attracted because he's responsible and he's good and he's a provider and he's selfless and he's generous and he's all these things. You can list a long list, but often when a guy says, "Why are you attracted to her?" She said, "Well, my gosh, she's a goddess." You say, "I'm not a goddess." But he thinks so.
A story's coming to mind. I had a dear friend who attended St. Mary's back in the heyday, and her now husband attended Notre Dame. And she was the one person who said no. He dated other people while he dated her. He dated someone else while she was abroad in Rome. And in the end, she was the person he married. And he always had that respect for her, that even someone who didn't have faith, she continued to say no when he had access to any other woman. He played football for Notre Dame. And I always thought that was such a profound example for women today to understand the power of your yes and the power of your no, and the self-respect it shows for yourself and other people.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, the time before marriage is so precious for getting to know another person and not to be, it's almost impossible to keep your wits about you anyway when you're terribly in love and attracted to a person. I mean, you can just overlook so many things, but when you're having sex, you totally overlook things, and you're not honest with each other, and you're not honest with yourself. And you make believe, because the sexual attraction is so powerful. And there's all sorts of reasons. I talk in my tape. You move in with this person and you get along, but you're not really honest. You don't really disclose yourself, because then you'd have to break up, and then who gets the house and who gets the dog and who gets the TV, and there's just crazy, and you don't want to start all over. So it's all based upon make believe. Whereas before marriage, you should really be doing your best to figure out, who is this person, and asking people honestly, what do you think? What do you think of Joe? Ask your dad, ask your mother, and say, I might marry him, so you got to be careful. But, tell me, what do you think? What do you see? Because we don't see very well. We see one thing and maybe a few things, but there's a lot we might not see. And but again, those are practical reasons. And the practical reasons are huge. Don't get pregnant before marriage. Don't be tempted to get an abortion. Don't have to be a single mother. Don't have to put a baby up for adoption. Just don't have sex before marriage. It just makes, I see these young women that I know and I love having sex before marriage, and I know a pregnancy would be a disaster. Now, I like the guys. But I'm thinking your whole life will be together is going to be starting off on a very difficult foot. You don't need that. Don't do it. But the most important thing is that, go ahead. You want
And
to say
the
something?
simplicity that occurs, Dr. Smith, when someone eliminates intimacy prior to marriage. You're no longer so emotionally wrapped up in a different way with a chemical emotional bond that's been formed because of intimacy prior to marriage. I always say it's like wearing a pair of strong sunglasses that you see someone in a totally different light when you are engaging in intimacy prior to marriage. And when you remove that layer of ultimately lack of protection, really, truly, what happens is when you're not on that contraception, it allows you to see them for who they are rather than what you've made them to be because of your engagement prior to marriage.
Yeah, John Paul II, his Love and Responsibility, keeps talking about verifying your love, testing it, verifying it. Is it really based on fantasy or is it based on reality? And of course, the person is not going to be perfect. If you're looking for that, you're a fool. But, you just say, no, but the good qualities are incredible. And the bad qualities I can live with, and I think they might get past them at some point. But it's that willing to see who the person is and be able to go to another place to sleep at night is extremely important. You have to have that distance. You have to have that time to think as you're driving away. What was that all about? All right, is this really a good thing? And then to, have a couple days where you're apart thinking things through. If you're living with a person, you sweep things under the rug. You do not bring them to the light and pay attention to them. So preparing for marriage is phenomenally important. And having sex before marriage is a very, very bad preparation for marriage. Because marriage is it's a lifetime commitment. It's this beautiful lifetime commitment, which is insane in a certain sense. And who would put their happiness in someone else's hands that they've, been seduced by these hormones to make this lifetime promise to? So that's why you got to have a lot of things in place and trust God. Trust that God will be with you. So you want to respect God's creation. God gave us this great gift of sexuality. He made this reality, marriage, and he wants us to engage in it.
That's Dr. Janet Smith. We'll link to her talks, Contraception, Why Not, and many of her others. Author, speaker, especially advocating for the church's teaching on contraception. Thank you, Dr. Smith, for joining us. I'll be right back to talk about why or why not Britney should be feared or should she be freed. We'll be right back here on Trending with Timmerie.
We're talking about what you're thinking about. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
What is that I hear? Hit me, baby, one more time. Thank God we didn't play it because I don't know if I can take it. I think that the Freaky Friday version, if you watch Freaky Friday, total 90s kid with Lindsay Lohan, the one guy is out in front of her house singing Hit Me Baby One More Time, and she's embarrassed, so she totally football tackles him and interrupts him in the middle of the song. Okay, are you for freeing Britney or are you not for freeing Britney? And you're wondering, why are we talking about this on Catholic radio? Well, it's actually a big deal. When we talk about conservatorship, did you know that actually, we're seeing that the House of Representatives Special Judiciary Committee is actually possibly going to take up concern over conservatorship. Is Britney Spears someone to be feared in society, or is she someone to be freed? That's ultimately the question. We'll do a little bit of kind of a Sparks Notes version of what's happened. You may recall about 13, 14 years ago, Britney Spears spiraled. She had 2 kids, was doing crazy things with her kids. She shaved her head. She pulled a Britney not wearing underwear in public under her dress. She was on drugs. She had all these things apparently that were going on. And all of a sudden, we find out that her father is working to get conservatorship of her. And it's initially supposed to be 1 year long that her father, Jamie Spears, not her sister, would essentially help to get her life under control. Now, you and I, from a public perspective back in 2008, probably thought that this was a good idea. In fact, many people from an outside perspective were watching saying, wow, look, she's released a single. Her new album, Circus, is coming out. She appeared on How I Met Your Mother. She must be making a comeback. But you could also ask the question, if things are so wrong with Britney that she immediately needs to lose, essentially, license to take over her own life, why is she in the public's eye so much? Now, that question wasn't asked until years later, basically the last year. So what happened is after that 1 year conservatorship, her father, Jamie Spears, then asked for ongoing conservatorship. Now, it's been 12 years. His reason for essentially being granted by the courts conservatorship is that he claimed that she had the early onset of dementia that started in her 20s. Well, what's come out is that there actually was not evidence of this. What does it mean to be under someone's conservatorship? Well, essentially, Britney Spears can't drive, vote, use social media without being monitored, spend her own money, see how her own money's even spent. Who she speaks to is even determined and vetted. She can't even hire her own lawyers against her conservatorship. So as we've seen this go on, it's interesting because she's had multiple world tours. She's been a judge on X Factor, determining other people's futures, as well as selling perfume and many other things. So what is this all about? Well, I'm giving you the Sparks Notes version. I'll give you the Catholic take in a minute. But as you and I can probably guess, why do people take conservatorship of the elderly? Usually, it's taken when an elderly relative isn't capable of making decisions. In this case, it's been taken from a young woman who, yes, has had some very serious things happen in her life that have been very unhealthy and impacted her children, led to a divorce, and so on. But I think that you and I can read between the lines and see that this is about money as well. So here's what's happened. Recently, over the last year, there have been some changes. For example, Britney doesn't want to have her father be conservator over her anymore. In fact, what's happened is the court has granted a co-conservatorship between Bessemer Trust and Jamie Spears, her father. She doesn't want her father to be a conservator, and her father's actually in the court recently fighting to have Bessemer Trust kind of clarified. He doesn't like basically his lack of power and decision-making over his daughter. Now, some might say, well, it's her father. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best decision for her, what he decides. We're talking about a 38-year-old woman who has had multiple international tours, an incredibly successful career, and maybe we should ponder whether or not she should have the freedom to determine her own life. Now, back in November, Britney Spears' attorney, now I believe the court actually, because she's not allowed to hire her own attorneys because her money decision-making power is under her father, the court actually appointed her an attorney. Now, I'm not sure if that's the Samuel Ingham, but I'm pretty sure it is. But essentially, her attorney has made it clear that Britney does not want her father as co-conservator or conservator at all. The attorney has said, my client has informed me that she is afraid of her father. That's what he told the judge. And Britney has also decided this. This was the turning of the tide on the Free Britney movement and why so many people are talking about it. She's refusing to perform again until her father is no longer in charge of her career. So this happened back in November. Now in February, attorneys for Britney Spears and her father are in court over his new shared conservatorship and basically who controls the money. Now guess what? 2 House Republicans have actually decided that they are pro-Free Britney. Maybe you are too now. And they're actually saying that this whole issue, not of Britney Spears, but of conservatorship, should actually be taken up by the House Judiciary Committee to basically have a hearing about personal freedoms. So Conservatorship essentially has to do with a legal process in which someone is determined unfit to care for and make their own decisions. Usually a spouse, a family member is appointed as the conservator. In this case, it's her father, Jamie Spears. But this is what it brings to mind. And if you're just joining us, you're listening to Trending with Timmerie. We're talking about Free Britney. Let me know. Head over to my Instagram. Let me know what you think about this entire thing. Maybe you've watched the documentary. But what this has to do with, essentially, is the question of having control over another person. In 2008, we may have thought that it was good that her father took conservatorship. It was sad she lost her children, her marriage fell apart, various addictions, shaving her head. Some might say she was kind of loony here. But does that justify, even in the face of an addictive culture, such as drugs, because maybe you're thinking about someone you know, and you think, well, I don't think so-and-so should be making their own decisions. Well, here's something I think of. One, they're adults in our culture today. But most importantly, God doesn't even take this kind of control of us. God has made us with intellect and free will. And with free will, unfortunately, that means that we can freely choose whatever we want, even that which isn't good for us. Now, when we pray and we grow in the spiritual life, our surrender to God, our total abandonment to Him, has Him working through us. But we still are free. We have free will. It's our free will that leaves us open to God working in us. And I think that that's so important for us to ponder. Some people might say, well, she was off her rocker. Look at what happened with her kids, her marriage, everything she was doing. Well, look at what you and I do. And does God suddenly take away a basic dimension of what it means to be a human person? That is our free will? No. God doesn't violate our free will. That's what a good father does. Lovingly, He may intercede. Lovingly, He may offer us opportunities for holiness, opportunities for reconciliation. But God does not take away our free will. In fact, I would argue the only person that takes away our free will is you and I. Now, this brings me to the point of why I'm discussing this during our happy hour. Well, I think that often people think that to be a person of religion, to be a Catholic, means to have your life ruled by others and to lose your freedom. But actually, the freest thing you can do is, in your free will, choose to cooperate with God and the great plan He has in implementing His will, because He is a true good and ultimate good, ultimate love. But not only that, I think we are the ones who can get in the way of our own freedom as well, from the perspective that when we sin, we start to form bad habits. When we form those bad habits, we tend to create a bad habit that sometimes can prevent us from choosing what is good, even when we desire it. For example, think of two great saints, such as St. Augustine, who said he wanted to be chaste, but said, God, not yet, because although he desired it, his body, his habits weren't ready. St. Paul as well is another person who we don't exactly know what sin he was struggling with, but he talks in Scripture in the New Testament about how the very things that he does are the exact things he doesn't want to do. So isn't this ultimately what Lent is about? Lent is about rooting out sin in our lives so that we too can be free. So I really do believe that whether or not Britney Spears is the perfect person to be out in society, that we should probably be advocating for her to be freed. I think it's Catholic to be pro-free Britney. I don't know. What do you think? You can let me know if you're free Britney or not, but a greater conversation could be had about this whole idea of conservatorship. Whether or not conservatorship should be something that is essentially perpetual, especially for someone of her age. And that's the problem. Conservatorship in our great nation, when someone is granted conservatorship, it's very difficult for that to be abolished, for that to go away. It's basically a perpetual signing over of one person's life to another. And again, God doesn't take away our free will. What right do we have to take away the free will of others? But also, how can we work on becoming less attached to those things which truly prevent our free will and our intellect from functioning as it ought? You're listening to Trending with Timmerie. I'll be back with you tomorrow. That's Tuesday. I can't wait. This is Timmerie from Trending with Timmerie. Tuesday on Trending, it's all about men and women. Did you know that the goal of exercise for women is different than the goal of exercise for men? And it doesn't just have to do with looks and how much you can lift. So we're going to talk about that, along with the fact that apparently your kids aren't supposed to say mom and dad anymore in school. Let's talk about parents' rights. Join me at 6 p.m. Central on Relevant Radio or the Relevant Radio app.